As of this writing, it's been 45 days since the Denver Nuggets clinched the 2023 NBA title, and since then, the Warriors have revamped their lineup while still keeping a lookout for a couple of talented players, to fill their last two spots. Hey, what's happening everyone? This is Swish. Today's video is going to be a bit extended, so get ready for a deep dive. Call it the sub-machine. Too early? Anyway, be sure to hit that subscribe button and become a part of the most entertaining NBA channel on the planet. So far, the Warriors have gutted their roster, beginning with starting caliber players all the way through their two-way spots. This was effectively a clean sweep of the entire supporting cast that stripped the team down to their 5 starters and 2 of 3 recent lottery picks. While the team is retaining Gary Payton, he was in fact acquired in a trade that included the Warriors' number 2 overall pick in James Wiseman, so he's a bit of an exception here. Once the Wiseman trade was finalized, the writing was on the wall. That is, it didn't matter where you were selected in the draft, or how much potential you may have. You either made it into the rotation, or you were getting traded. This might be news to some, but those on the inside knew this all along. This was the second major issue with the Warriors in 2023, if we're going in chronological order. I'll break this down a bit further, but let's identify the other 2 major issues. Keep in mind that while there are some overlaps in the issues, they are distinct issues which have their own impact. The third major issue is that there were too many guys on the roster not getting actual playing time. That in and of itself led to a host of other issues, which I'll explain further. Lastly, the issue that no one seems to want to stop talking about.
I think he's a smart guy. I just don't understand why in this situation he's going down this road.
How much do you think that your veterans create a sense of chaos as a team?
On the court?
Regardless of what Jordan Poole said or did, that's something that y'all handle one-on-one as men behind closed doors.
Jordan Poole probably called him the B word.
Draymond drove out Jordan Poole. Draymond drove out KD. Draymond's this problem, but he's not. He's not this massive problem that people are trying to make him out to be.
I think Draymond would not cross the lines. He crossed with KD and Poole, with Steph, with Clay, with Kerr.
The Draymond Green and Jordan Poole altercation, which certainly spearheaded Draymond's and Steve Kerr's loss of the locker room. Yes, you heard that right. It wasn't just Dre's leadership that was impacted, as Steve Kerr admitted as much. That first issue was essentially a 2-in-1, where the first was around the beginning of the season, and the second was more like reverberations felt throughout the season. What we have now is an insane Warriors puzzle that we're going to piece together to see how the Warriors season fell apart, and dissect the team's plan to put things back together for the upcoming season. So without further delay, let's get to it. Starting with the first issue, this is one I've gone into a little bit in a number of earlier videos. I explained the issues at the start of the year when Draymond and Jordan Poole had their falling out, following which we saw the season start off rather slowly. This was a stark difference to last season, and the causes for concern were immediately raised. Not by me though, as I was under the impression things would be fine because, nothing else really changed as we had the same team core, right? Man, was I wrong. But, to be fair, there was a lot going on behind the scenes that didn't exactly get placed front and center. Despite this, however, there were a lot of speculations, and as it got further into the season, I started pointing out a lot of these and how they seem to be affecting the team. While the altercation itself was pretty bad, considering Draymond knocked Poole out cold, it only got worse. Yes, I'm talking about the leak, as in the footage of the punch created an absolute PR nightmare. But it doesn't stop there. While the league made it worse for the PR department, things got even worse. The franchise was clearly more upset about the leak than they were about the punch, and that was a big problem. You'll see how this may have single-handedly led to the demise of the Warriors season. As if that wasn't bad enough, this handling of the situation sent a clear message to the young players on the team. What's important is keeping this core together. Everything else is secondary. We're not chasing away guys that have brought us championships. There's them, and there's you. punch itself led to guys like Poole, Kuminga, and likely others not really having that type of respect for Draymond. As the leader of the team, Draymond lost complete control of himself that day at practice and complete control of the team for the rest of the season. You want to know the impact a glue guy, the heart and soul of a team, a guy like Draymond has on a championship team? This is it. So now the team has no leader. Well, what about the coach? This is part B of major issue number 1. As I mentioned, Steve Kerr also lost the team, but we'll circle back to this in a moment as it really became obvious later on in the season, and Kerr didn't even talk about this until the end of the season. Reason 2 was basically the death knell for the 2-timeline rebuild. James Wiseman, the number 2 pick, got traded, and this meant no one was untouchable. While it's true that the Warriors had a hard time seeing Wiseman being able to contribute to the team, this doesn't mean they didn't think he'd be able to contribute in the future. The fact that they were able to part ways means that the team decided right then that the 2-timeline approach was in fact over, and this was only the beginning of what would be a complete reversal on last year's direction. Keep in mind that last year's direction was directly driven by the outcome of the 2022 NBA Finals. The Warriors had just won the chip, so it only made sense to move forward with the same approach, albeit a monkey wrench was thrown into the blueprint, so nothing was the same. What's sad is that it could be argued that this was driven more by that punch than talent level or even a lack of coaching. This trade gave Steve Kerr full control of the team. That is, the franchise will be molding this team to fit what won them their recent championships. If Steve Kerr didn't give you minutes, you were gone. The veteran player the Warriors received in return wasn't even a high trade target until the Warriors utilized him in a way that led to a championship the prior year. Gary Payton II is a very good veteran player, but this return on second overall pick was the Warriors putting their foot down and saying, we're going to surround our core guys with win-now veterans with the same level of hunger. This led me to believe that all the young guys were available at last season's trade deadline, including Kuminga and Moody, which is why I made a video on that specific topic at that time. None of the young guys were indispensable, but a lot of fans still had hope that they would somehow stay on the roster. This led to further reverberations of the punch because the team had gone after whomever released the video a lot more aggressively than they did Draymond, who actually threw the punch. So you can see how with this in the background, these young players are thinking, well, the franchise doesn't seem to care much because they didn't really try to protect Poole or do something meaningful in terms of punishment or retribution for Green, and now they've really sunken their teeth in with the Wiseman trade. But this was likely bubbling up under the surface back before All-Star break, before the trade deadline. Yes, it was. This led to major issue number 3. Steve Kerr had not been giving these young guys much playing time either, and you would see these games the Warriors really had no hope of winning, and Kerr would have two-way players out there on the floor who likely weren't going to be getting a contract and would likely be off the team at the end of the year. This just wasn't good, and it wasn't helping an already touchy situation.
We've gotten to the point where Steph, Draymond, Klay Thompson, they become hard to play with because they're so demanding and they're so judgmental. They've been exclusive. They have not included the young players like great leaders would. They've put up a line as opposed to acknowledging their young players and trying to help them. Instead, they are saying, you want us to play with these guys? You cannot win. Get Wiseman out of here. Get Payton II back. Get Moody out of here. Start not playing Kuminga as much. Put DiVincenzo in there. We like DiVincenzo. It's hard to play the champions. Their standards are really high. I think the young players play scared at times because the veterans are just so harsh.
So, what was up with the lack of playing time? Is this on Steve Kerr not giving them the opportunity? Or is it on the young guys for not playing well?
None of those guys on Miami are sitting there saying, well, I didn't play, or man, they put in so-and-so. Like, they're just all about winning. When you have that championship mentality, every guy's bought in. Nobody cares about any of that stuff. You don't go into the locker room saying, well, I should have played more. And it makes the decisions for the coach really simple. You just go with your gut and go with whoever's playing well.
This clip is very telling. Steve actually ends up calling out the young guys here for two things. The first, as he puts it, is the whining and complaining about playing time. He then brings up a second point where he compares the Warriors to the Heat and pointed out how all the Heat players have bought into the franchise and all share a common goal, which is to win at all costs.
He's on one. Caleb Martin is absolutely on fire out here.
The next issue, which he puts bluntly, is that the young guys weren't playing well. So let me rearrange what Steve Kerr said so he can explain clearly what he means. Guys not playing well led to them not getting minutes, which then led to them complaining. But obviously that's not the whole story, as there's still something missing. Let's see if we can find it. In another piece published elsewhere, Steve Kerr had this to say: "I will say that I feel like I failed last year in connecting the group. So the video with the interview with Draymond was posted June 5th, and the statement was posted in an article on the 22nd of July. If I had to come to my own conclusion, the video was more pointing the finger at the young guys, which is exactly why he lost the locker room. The statement he made about last year's failure was after taking some time to reflect, after which he redirected some of that blame to himself. You see, even if Kerr didn't admit this was a problem, this would have still given rise to scrutiny, and in true Swish fashion, I will leave no stone unturned, and expose the dirt anyway." Here's just one example. Jonathan Kuminga had a pretty big jump last year in his abilities. He would string together a number of really good games, and a single mistake would see him benched for multiple games in a row. Barely seeing the floor while a player, let's choose one at random and say Anthony Lamb. Lamb would see an equal number of minutes while playing quite awful. Don't believe me? You don't have to. The numbers speak for themselves. While Kuminga was not playing in a role that was primarily scoring, for 2023, he still averaged 10 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, and 2 assists in 21 minutes. He shot 52% from the field and 37% from 3. While he was left open on the perimeter, he still made other teams pay for leaving him unguarded. The Grizzlies almost fell apart at the seams because Kuminga couldn't stop hitting threes. Their whole game plan up. Lamb, on the other hand, played 1 less minute per game while putting up 6.7 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. He shot 47% from the field and just under 37% from 3. While he played the forward position, his job was to bring some scoring off the bench while playing some defense. That might lead you to speculate that maybe he was better on defense than Kuminga. During the same time period, Lamb had a 115.3 defensive rating, while Kuminga was hanging around 114.8. Seems like a marginal difference, but means a lot for players on the same team that regularly play the same unit. What's incredible is that Kuminga did this while guarding the opposing team's best player. Yet here he is, a young lottery pick playing identical minutes to a two-way player. This is just one of a number of insane things done this year that really make you wonder about the future of the team as far as the direction they're headed and what it means for Steve Kerr's tenure as coach. Recently, Monty Poole had some comments regarding Draymond Green and Jonathan Kuminga.
Draymond shared with us that he has no relationship with Jonathan Kuminga. And it blew me away because I'm like, you're the leader. You're supposed to show these guys the ropes. When you heard Dre say that and then watch kind of how the year played out with Kuminga and the young guys, did that strike you like it struck me?
No, that's a problem. It's a problem.
These comments elicited some negative connotations, but let's try to add some context, if we didn't already. Draymond, for all the years he's been a Warrior, has been a very vocal leader. He's not been the best, but certainly not the worst. Just like anyone else, he's had his good days.
He missed the shot tonight. Did he? I did it. He did too. It's okay. Keep it moving. He missed the shot. All of us have. Nobody's perfect.
And his not so good days.
I was going to grab a rebound. He came and grabbed it. I'm thinking he's going to just toss it to me and we're going to run up court and I'm going to shoot the shot. And we all figured that would happen. And then when it didn't, I was kind of shocked. And then I was just like, oh, Dre, like, let me see that. And then he turned it over. I'm like, I'm just so confused at that point because he never, ever did nothing like that before. And everybody on the bench was confused, too. And then we came back. Then I just heard him screaming. And I was like, hold up. He usually screaming when he come back to the bench. But what is he saying? Then he started going off.
This was a contract year for Draymond, and how well the team does would weigh heavily on what the team would offer him to re-sign. With an up-and-coming player like Jonathan Kuminga, it's understandable that JK playing well is a bit of a bittersweet experience for Draymond. Both players play the 4, and his ascension meant just the opposite for Dre. This would obviously lead to some tension between the two players, and it doesn't necessarily mean they hate each other. It simply means Draymond would feel that upward pressure from who is more than likely his future replacement, and if he's not ready to go at this point, then he's going to have to push back. For some additional perspective, Patrick Baldwin Jr., a 6'10" shooter, averaged just 7 minutes per game and still shot 38% from deep and had 4 points per. Moses Moody also faced similar issues as he would showcase his tenacity and willingness to do whatever it takes to win and hit his shots once he got going. Anyone that's played the game will tell you it takes time to build rhythm. We've seen the investment in Klay Thompson as far as regaining his shooting touch. It was clear Steve Kerr was not even remotely close to being interested in giving these young players any playing time, and once we got past the trade deadline, these guys knew what time it was. So again, I ask, was the lack of playing time due to guys not playing well, or was it due to a lack of proper coaching? A bit of favoritism? Saying one thing and then doing another? Actually, instead of asking you guys, let's hear what Steve Kerr in July of 2023 thinks. Here's more of his quote. I will say that I feel like I failed last year in connecting the group. I have taken a lot of time this summer to think about last year, things I could have and should have done differently. I really believe that sometimes losing sort of forces you to reassess and reevaluate. And bam, there you have it. The punch led to some discord in the locker room. The team lost their leaders in Draymond and Steve Kerr. Management didn't resolve this issue in any way that seemed justified to the young guys. The special treatment given to Draymond led to an us versus them mentality, as Steve Kerr essentially fanned the flames by not backing up the young players. This led to a breakdown in the team structure. The team's confidence in its young players had vanished halfway through the season due to the underperformance on the road. At that point in time, and with management finally out of options, they decided they could not keep this team together as structured, and ended up trading away all of their young players except Kuminga and Moody, who were likely only kept due to the Warriors not getting any decent offers on either player. Not their fault, as they weren't showcased enough to even bring in what they're truly worth. The young core of guys all saw this coming, however, which they were correct, as they were scapegoated as the reason the team was underperforming, which led to them being offloaded elsewhere. The supporting cast was then completely purged, leaving the Dubs with less than half the team and a completely new approach to 2024. So, here's the rest of the Steve Kerr quote. I really believe that sometimes losing sort of forces you to reassess and reevaluate, and I'm excited about coming back next year with a renewed focus and energy and spirit from the entire group. And that starts with me, and I can't wait. The Warriors, as per Steve Kerr, look to come back next year with a different and renewed mindset, as well as a different supporting cast. That new supporting cast will so far consist of Chris Paul, Corey Joseph, Dario Saric, Brandon Podziemski, Trace Jackson-Davis, and Lester Quinones. So, what does a renewed focus look like? Kerr had this to say after the Warriors signed Chris Paul. We're going to be a lot different. The last thing I'm going to do is say anything about a team that just won a championship a year ago and then fought through a difficult season. I've loved this group that we've had the last couple of years, but the biggest point is that we sensed we needed a shift. Didn't mean we needed an overhaul, but we needed a shift of some sort. I think everybody in the organization sensed that, and it feels like we made a pretty significant shift without giving up our identity and our sense of who we are as a team. I think all in all, it's a very positive shift. So with the old support cast gone and Chris Paul added into the fold, Steve Kerr is quite clear in echoing what I said earlier. The team didn't feel it could make it work with the young guys as well as the main core of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green after that experience because, let's face it, this isn't what you typically hear out of Golden State. The addition of Paul is also a big change to the type of game the Warriors will play in non-Steph minutes, and Steve recognizing it as basically a shift in the team philosophy in a way means that he understands things will be a lot different with Chris. The other major veteran signings of Corey Joseph and Dario Saric didn't go untouched. When asked what he thought about the signing of those two players, this was Kerr's response. We needed guys like Saric and Corey Joseph who have been through the NBA rigors and understand what it means to be a leader from the middle of the roster and how important that is. Mike, referring to Dunleavy, really recognized that was an area we needed help. So he went out without many resources and fortified our roster and put us in position moving forward. There are a few things to unpack here. The first being that the team will be looking to these guys to lead from the middle of the roster. In other words, these two players are going to be leading the second unit. But that's not all. What this also likely means is that Chris Paul won't actually be in the middle or leading from the middle. He will be regularly starting for the Warriors unless there's some reason not to. Now, I know a lot of you might disagree, but hear me out. Kerr has never and will never be a young players type of coach. He's proven this repeatedly, so let's not expect this to change anytime soon. Chris Paul's experience will give Kerr the veteran experience he craves that he never really thought Jordan Poole had enough of to get into the starting lineup. We're now selecting between CP3 off the bench or Kevon Looney. I think Kerr will likely take the additional shooter option due to his experience and historically his ability to defend and run a staggered rotation. This gives the Warriors a wicked starting lineup, and I'm fully expecting Kerr to give this lineup a true shot with Draymond at the 5. I mean, you think they just gave him $100 million to plant daisies in the front court? Paul has never been a bench guy either, so if this isn't proof that Kerr will be injecting him into the starting lineup come October, nothing else will convince you until the fall.
Thoughts on joining the Warriors?
I'm excited. I'm excited to team up with Steph. We got all this stuff that's connected to each other, and I think through sports sometimes you just compete so crazy, so I'm excited about playing alongside of him. Yeah, Draymond, I feel sorry for the other teams that's got to play against both of us because he's always been very vocal, as I am. I've always thrived with guys like that. Clay just always been Clay. Here and there, you know, we would compete against each other over time, and, you know, a lot of times the fans see the pushing, the fighting and all that, but when you know somebody works that hard, then there's always a lot of respect there too.
So this is exactly the reason why the Warriors signed Joseph, because they're not expecting CP3 to be a bench guy. Kevon Looney will end up behind Dre and Kuminga behind Andrew Wiggins. Saric will be adjacent to Looney and Joseph behind CP3. The last guy in the regular rotation for the moment will be Moses Moody, who will likely slot in behind Klay Thompson, which gives the Warriors leeway to put in a veteran wing player. These are just some of the major standout positions, but the team will likely be fluid for the remaining players, as this will be the doubling down of a positionless type of basketball. What this does mean is that we'll likely see a good bit of action from two-way player Lester Quinones as well as Jackson Davis. While Pods may see some minutes, what's going to get him minutes is hitting shots, making passes, and being serviceable on D. Without those attributes, he might see him get assigned to the G League to get reps. All these leadership talks, however, seem to be aimed at one thing: locker room culture. It would behoove the franchise to ensure that leadership starts with the veterans and then on to the young players. They've already lost two very good players due to the leadership failures inside the locker room, and this is the remedy they've put in place to approach 2024.
No, that's a problem. It's a problem. And to me, when he swung on Jordan last year, one of my first thoughts is the Warriors have a bunch of young guys on this team. This is the exact wrong kind of impression you want to see from your leader. Here's Draymond, a four-time champion, defensive player of the year, all-defensive team guy, a team leader, and he's swinging on a guy who's a lot smarter than he is, who is 9 years younger than he is. And it struck the wrong tone. And the Warriors had Kuminga and Moody and Wiseman and Baldwin and Rollins, and all those guys were in training camp, and they saw this. And some of these guys are just so new to the NBA, and they might be thinking, is this what leadership is?
Draymond's handling of the Poole situation post-trade has not been the most professional, and he's even taken some flack from Poole's dad, Anthony, for the way he dealt with the family after the issue, with Anthony letting Draymond know that he's lost all respect for him, and he wouldn't think twice about showing him how he really feels if they came across each other in person. Monty Poole's discussion regarding Draymond having to make things right with Kuminga is yet another model of poor leadership, but considering the changes made since last year, we'll see how that works itself out this season. While this issue could effectively stymie JK's progress, it gives us a few more years of Dre. Since Draymond was able to sign his contract with the team and lock in for the next 4 years, some of that tension has likely been relieved, and the team may have won out after all, as he's likely to put his all into coaxing his young protege along, while making his money along the way. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all your notifications so you don't miss any of my latest uploads. Till next time, swish!